Hi everyone, thanks for clicking on the video. My name is Clome, or Mank Deem, and I've been maining Awakening Mystic in PVE for 4 years. As someone who has remained dedicated to mastering her and pushing her potential in PVE, I thought it would be nice to make a video guide that teaches others how to play her. She's my forever main, and I'd love for others to enjoy her as well. This video was my first venture into video editing, so it's been a challenge to put everything together. Despite my best efforts, I couldn't make everything as polished as I would have liked. In particular, I apologize for the inconsistent voice recordings. I've tirelessly tried to tinker with settings I don't fully understand, and I've even lost my settings partway through the project. Still, I hope that this video inspires people to try Awakening Mystic, and maybe some will learn to love her as I have. Enjoy! First, I'd like to set some expectations for this guide. My core intent is to teach players how to PvE with Awakening Mystic. By the end of this video, players will have a solid understanding of how the kit works in PvE. To clarify, I will not be discussing anything PvP related, nor will I adjust any information with PvP in mind. This guide is strictly for PvE. In general, I do expect viewers to have a basic understanding of BDO. They should be familiar with the basics of BDO combat, such as pre-awakening and awakening stances, special attack damage modifiers, and protections. For the sake of time, I also will not cover absolutely everything in Awakening Mystic's kit. A good rule of thumb you can have throughout the video is, the less I talk about something, the less important it is to PvE, at least in my opinion. Lastly, this video will be fairly long with a lot of information, so feel free to watch different sections as you please. With all that said, I'm excited to get started with the guide. Let's start with a detailed breakdown of Awakening Mystic's skills. Awakening Mystic has a relatively simple kit that is easy to understand. For the most part, Awakening Mystic stays in Awakening stance, with very few exceptions. That being said, there are some important pre-awakening skills that can be used in Awakening stance. Those skills are Absolute Mass Destruction, Crouching Wolf, Flash Step, and Silent Step. Keep these skills in mind, as I'll cover them later. The core of Awakening Mystic combat lies in her passive, Martial Spirit. When Awakening Mystic generates Martial Spirits, she can use them to enhance certain skills, giving them more damage or additional bonus effects. The main goal of Awakening Mystic is to generate and use Martial Spirits as efficiently as possible. In order to generate a Martial Spirit, she must first use skills to gain 10 Martial Spirit shards, at which point she will have 1 Martial Spirit. Awakening Mystic can hold up to 3 Martial Spirits at a time. There are 3 skills that can consume Martial Spirits to trigger their respective Sea Dragon effects. Rising Dragon requires and consumes 1 Martial Spirit to deal additional damage and apply a minus 20 DP effect to targets hit by the Sea Dragon. Wave Orb requires and consumes 2 Martial Spirits for additional damage, and Sea Burial requires and consumes 1 Martial Spirit for additional damage. Do keep in mind that you can use all 3 of these skills even when you don't have Martial Spirits. However, you should always have Martial Spirits ready for consumption when using any of these 3 skills. They are your hardest hitting skills, so using them without Martial Spirits will result in significantly lower damage. Generating Martial Spirit shards might seem a bit confusing at first, but once you become familiar with the main DPS skills, you'll quickly internalize shard generation. Awakening Mystic has a variety of skills that generate shards, but the main ones will be Rapid Stream, Tidal Burst, Gushing Waters, and Earth Splitter. There are additional skills that generate shards, and you'll become more familiar with them as you practice over time. Awakening Mystic's Martial Spirit passive also provides an additional plus 30% move speed and plus 10% critical hit rate buff for 5 seconds if you use certain skills. Those skills will likely be Rapid Stream, Tidal Burst, and maybe Dragon Strike. Keeping up the critical hit rate buff is beneficial in maintaining 100% critical hit rate, and the movement speed helps too when moving during a grind. Next, I'd like to discuss Awakening Mystic's E-buff, Dragonize. Ideally, you want to use Dragonize for its offensive buffs. 20 all AP and 30% attack speed is nice to have, so try to use Dragonize whenever it's off cooldown. Do avoid using Dragonize, however, when Black Spirit's Rage is active. The AP buffs don't stack, and the attack speed buff from BSR always overrides Dragonize's buff. What I mean is, if you use Dragonize while BSR is active, and the BSR buff disappears, then the attack speed buff from Dragonize will not be applied once the BSR buff expires. Make sure that you use Dragonize and BSR separately at all times. Speaking of BSR, the only skill BSR worth using is Rising Dragon's 100% BSR in endgame spots where mobs are tankier. Keep all other BSRs locked. I'd also like to bring up another crucial skill relevant to the Martial Spirit passive. Crouching Wolf, when used by itself, will give a 10% attack speed buff for 10 seconds. If it is used with 3 Martial Spirits, however, it will instead give a 20% attack speed buff, and it will not consume any of your Martial Spirits. Therefore, it is extremely important that you use Crouching Wolf with 3 Martial Spirits. Do note that Crouching Wolf's attack speed buff will not stack with Dragonize or BSR. Only when neither buff is active do you need to use Crouching Wolf with 3 Martial Spirits. There are some mixed opinions on Awakening Mystic's Magnus skill, Hurricane Kick. In my opinion, it's a useful protection skill with decent damage. Awakening Mystic doesn't have many high damage forward guard skills, so I like to have Hurricane Kick unlocked as an on-demand option. It's normally outside Awakening Mystic's standard DPS, so I'll always have it available in certain situations where I need the forward guard. Given that Hurricane Kick will put you in pre-awakening stance, here are some awakening skills that you can use to swap back to awakening stance. At this point, you will have seen a couple of the skills, and by the end of the video, you will be familiar with all of them. Next, I'll be covering Awakening Mystic skills that offer buffs, debuffs, and heals. Awakening Mystic really has only a few skills that offer buffs. First up is Spiral Torpedo's 16 AP buff for 10 seconds. Keep in mind that this AP buff will stack with BSR, but it will not stack with Dragonize. Like I mentioned previously with the Martial Spirit passive, we want to be triggering the move speed and critical hit rate passive buff as much as possible. We'll be using Rapid Stream and Tidal Burst the most frequently to trigger the buff. Due to a recent change, Dragon Strike now gives a plus 5% down attack buff for 10 seconds. This buff is pretty useful for spots like Crypt of Resting Thoughts or Tungrad Ruins, where you can knock down mobs and apply down attack damage. A lot of our main DPS skills have down attack, so despite the lower damage, Dragon Strike can be used if you need a bit more damage later in a combo. Unfortunately, Awakening Mystic does not have any standard DPS skills that offer accuracy buffs. I strongly recommend gaining accuracy via crystals and add-ons if you need more for a grind spot. Next up are debuff skills. Rapid Stream on first hit will apply a minus 20 all DP effect for 20 seconds on all targets hit, both on and off cooldown. Rising Dragon, when used with a Martial Spirit, will also apply a -20 all DP effect on targets hit for 10 seconds. So even if you don't get all your targets with Rapid Stream, you'll basically get an additional opportunity with Rising Dragon. Recently, Gushing Waters was given a -3% evasion shred for 10 seconds. Personally, I wouldn't recommend that you rely on this evasion shred to hit 100% hit rate. Gushing Waters is a hard-hitting skill, so it's better used in a burst combo than as a primer. Lastly are the heals. Awakening Mystic has a ton of healing built into her kit. For the sake of time, I've decided not to go through every single skill that has healing. Personally, I've never needed to think about how much I heal or adjust my combo in order to heal more. Just know that Awakening Mystic has a ton of healing, and as long as you're doing your combo, you're going to be sustaining yourself quite well. The next section of this guide will be movement, and Awakening Mystic has a plethora of options. Flash Step will be the go-to skill whenever you need a burst of lateral movement. On use, it provides a 20% move speed buff for 10 seconds. It is affected by move speed, so the Martial Spirit move speed bonus will apply. You can decide to go either forwards or backwards with it, and you can turn your camera during Flash Step to change directions about halfway through the dash. You can also choose to extend Flash Step with Double Flash, which provides you the opportunity of 2 extra dashes. Basically, whenever you use Flash Step, you can decide to go between 1 to 3 dashes. Regardless of your choice, however, Flash Step will go on cooldown. If Flash Step is on cooldown and you still wish to dash, you can still do so if you have Martial Spirits. 1 dash will take up 1 Martial Spirit, so effectively, if you have 3 Martial Spirits, you can dash a total of 6 times. Stack that with Tranquility, which gives you 3 Martial Spirits, and that's 9 dashes total. All dashes are PVE iframes, so don't worry about distinguishing between iframe and super armor. Flash Step is a pre-awakening skill that you can use in both pre-awakening and awakening stances. If you decide to use Flash Step in pre-awakening stance, you can still use Double Flash, which will immediately convert you to awakening stance. Spiral Torpedo is a good option to use both for movement from pack to pack, as well as repositioning during a combo to hit mobs' backs. It goes through mobs very easily, and it gives a +16 AP buff, as I've mentioned previously. During the startup animation, Mystic will turn with your camera before locking in a direction once you start moving. You can technically use mouse movement to change directions during the movement portion of the skill, but it's not necessary to use in PvE. Do be warned that the travel distance is actually quite far. There may be cases where using Spiral Torpedo puts you too far away from the pack you're trying to hit, so you'll need to practice with it to get used to the distance. Another skill you can use for repositioning is Crouching Wolf. If you use the skill and hold back, you will do a quick backdash that has a brief iframe. Given that you will likely use Crouching Wolf a lot for the attack speed buff, you can also use the backstep to reposition yourself for easy back attacks. I'd personally like to highlight Absolute Mass Destruction as an excellent repositioning tool. The first hit is essentially a spammable mini side dash. To chain Mass Destruction first hits, you first input and hold side R and B, and then you hold W afterwards. You will continue to use the first hit of Mass Destruction instead of going through all 3 hits. In my opinion, Mass Destruction is incredibly underrated. It's a super fast repositioning tool that you can use whenever you need to. The only downside is its short travel distance. I highly recommend that you get comfortable with using Mass Destruction. In the right scenario, it's the perfect skill for easy back attacks. Of all the movement tools, Silent Step is the least useful. It is used more so for its iframe properties, and you can use Martial Spirits to cast a skill when it's on cooldown. I wouldn't really recommend using Silent Step in PvE for most cases. It doesn't cancel into anything well, and it's too clunky. Before moving to the next section, I like to briefly cover vertical movement. There are some niche cases for it, so here are a couple of options. For downward movement, W plus jump plus L and B is the best option if there's nothing obstructing your descent. Silent step into side L and B is a good option for shorter descents. For upward movement, we have twisted collision into flow landslide, which is cancelled into flow skyrammer. The combo is not very good, so I'd avoid any rotation that requires upward vertical movement if possible. The next section of the guide will cover additional info on Rabams, core skills, locked skills, and hotbar setup. Much of this portion is subjective, so I encourage you to make adjustments as you continue playing. In PvE, Awakening Mystic's Rabam skills are largely useless. Perfect Blow can be used for movement as it cancels into Flash Step well. Sadly, there aren't any good DPS options, so let's move on. Fortunately, Awakening Mystic doesn't have to worry too much about locking skills. Most of it comes down to preference. I lock Evasion because I end up using it by accident most of the time. I also lock Scissor Kick because it shares the same key inputs as Spiral Torpedo, which I may want to use to swap to Awakening Stance. Hidden Claw is a good skill to lock as well. It can be used in Awakening Stance and puts you into Pre-Awakening Stance. You can decide for yourself what you prefer to lock. For core skills, you want to choose Tidal Burst, which will give the skill a forward guard as long as it is off cooldown. As I've mentioned previously, Awakening Mystic is lacking in forward guard skills, so having forward guard on Tidal Burst will give us a little more protection. Last up is the Hotbar. Hotbar skills can be somewhat subjective, so I encourage you to find your playstyle and adjust accordingly. Personally, the important skills I keep on Hotbar are Hurricane Kick and Gushing Waters. At this point, I've covered all the basic information on Awakening Mystic's kit. The last section of this guide will delve into creating combos that make use of all the information presented. Before I continue, however, I'd like to mention some essential skill cancels that you should know. You may remember that I've mentioned Rapid Stream and Tidal Burst a couple times. These two skills are great filler damage, but only if you cancel Rapid Stream into Tidal Burst. The full version of Rapid Stream has a long animation and relatively low damage. By quickly tapping the inputs for Rapid Stream and immediately inputting Tidal Burst, you end up with the desired cancel. Additionally, this combo will generate 3 Martial Spirits. It's the go-to opener for easy shards. Wave Warp is another skill that requires animation cancelling. By itself, Wave Warp has a long charging animation, but certain skills will cancel into the damage portion of Wave Warp smoothly. The most common preceding skills are Dragon Strike, Raging Wind, Flash Step, the last hit of Hurricane Sweep, Tidal Burst, Gushing Waters, Earth Splitter, Spiral Torpedo, and Hurricane Kick. Raging Wind, when used by itself, has a long wind-up animation that can be cancelled only when Dragon Strike is used beforehand. Personally, I do find the skill linkage to be a bit clunky, so I'd recommend using Dragon Strike into Raging Wind only when you plan to apply down attack damage. Now that I've covered everything important, let's head to the battle arena for some combos and demonstrations. Hello everyone, it's Clome here. Welcome to the combo demonstration portion of the guide. So in this part I'll kind of be demonstrating small little bits here and there as well as combos and also explaining my thought process behind it. So Awakening Mystic PvE is all about generating shards and using martial spirits with spenders effectively and efficiently. So the first part is generating shards. As I've explained before, it's pretty much rapid stream into tidal burst, just like so. Bread and butter, we'll always do this as an opener pretty much. And then afterwards, crouching wolf for the 20% attack speed buff. Next up, the burst portion of the combo. And so this will be the combo. It'll be Rising Dragon, and then Gushing Waters into Wave Orb, Earth Splitter, Sea Burial. As you can see, enough Martial Spirits for all of my spenders. So here's the combo without any interruptions. There we go. That's a pretty good starting point. Pretty basic, pretty easy to learn, so you can practice that for a little bit. I'll just say this briefly now, but endgame Awakening Mystic is a little bit more free flow. There's no loopable combo, so you won't be able to loop this combo over and over again. For some modifications, there's Dragon Strike into Raging Wind. This is pretty much just for extra down attack damage. Dragon Strike doesn't really do a whole lot of damage, so it's a bit of a trade-off. But you can always put it in towards the beginning, kind of like something like this. And I wouldn't really recommend using it outside of, down attack relevant grind spots. Maybe Crypto Resting Thoughts, Tongue-Red Ruins, those types of spots where you can knock down the mobs. So next I want to briefly cover spender cooldowns. And so one of the big reasons why there is no loopable combo that Awakening Mystic can have is due to the cooldowns. So Rising Dragon has 8 seconds cooldown, Sea Burial is 7, Wave Orb is 11. So as you can see, based on these 3 numbers, you can anticipate that there is a cooldown issue. So in my example combo, I did Rising Dragon first, Wave Orb second, and then Sea Burial third. But if you're at a spot like Crypto Resting Thoughts where where mobs are tanky, you will likely have to do an additional loop, essentially repeat the combo, but you won't be able to. I will show it here. And now I'm waiting for spender cooldowns, just spamming Tidal Burst. And here, if I try to use Wave Orb, I can't until now. So what can we do to address the cooldown issue? Effectively, we need to be a little bit more flexible with our spender skill usage. For this specific scenario, we can basically swap Sea Burial and Wave Orb the second time around. And so here is a demonstration. So that was the first loop, and then now I'm just doing Tidal Burst as filler damage. So that was an example. I did put in a Dragon Strike there that was unnecessary. But you can see here I did Rising Dragon first, Sea Burial second, and then Wave Orb third. And I did Tidal Burst into Wave Orb, mostly because I didn't quite have Wave Orb up. It was a 1 second, or there was 1 second left on the cooldown, if you want to go back and watch. Tidal Burst is a really good spam skill, just to reiterate that one. A lot of times you'll be using it, just doing filler damage, and so that's why you can use it to cancel into Wave Orb. It will happen a lot during your grind. That covers the damage portion. And so next up will be movement. So to review briefly, our movement options are Flash Step, Spiral Torpedo, Absolute Mass Destruction, for first hit specifically, and then Crouching Wolf backstep. So flash step, pretty good, pretty straightforward. You can go forwards or backwards. And the main uses I have for it will be between packs. So if I do a pack here, I finish. Right, very good way to move from pack to pack. Another good way I like to use it is basically to move to mobs' backs right before a spender. So a good one to use is right before Wave Orb, because it acts as a Wave Orb cancel, like so. So you can see there, I did not do the charging animation of Wave Orb. The reason why I did it backwards is because it's basically a lot easier. Essentially, you will Wave Orb whatever direction you are facing. And so if you try to do a forward dash, a forward flash step into Wave Orb, it's a little more difficult. A lot of times you'll end up doing what I just did here. I didn't turn quite fast enough. And so I just ended up Wave Orbing to the side. So ultimately, you just want to learn to backdash first, and then Wave Orb forward. It doesn't have to be Wave Orb, by the way. You can right flash step and then do any other skill you want, right? Flash step into the Sea Burial. The only caution I would have is flash step does travel pretty far. And so if you try to maybe start the combo, you'll see here with Rising Dragon, you're a little too far away maybe to hit the pack. So do be careful of that. That will just take time and practice as you get used to the skill. Next up is Spiral Torpedo. It's pretty similar in function to Flash Step when it comes to grinding. So again, if you're finishing up a pack, you can move to the pack with Spiral Torpedo. And then additionally, you can also use it the same way as a Wave Orb cancel. Something like that. Sorry, I use Gushing Waters. But it works just like Flash Step in that regard. And on top of that, you have a plus 16 AP buff. And so I do want to quickly clarify that Spiral Torpedo may seem like it's a really good skill, but it's not necessarily something that is absolutely, required to use. In a lot of Awakening Mystic guides I've seen in the past, they will put Spiral Torpedo into their recommended or suggested combo. And for me personally, I don't think it necessarily needs to be baked into kind of a set combo. Like, I didn't have Spiral Torpedo as a part of my example combo, my starter combo, and there are a couple of reasons for that. So first up is the damage. So here is a list of Awakening Mystic skill damages. You can ignore the hit numbers. This was made before the hit changes. So just focus on the damage, and you'll see Spiral Torpedo is at the bottom. So it doesn't do a lot of damage, and it also does not hit 100% critical hit rate, pretty much no matter what you do. So it's low damage, and on top of that, it has a bit of a long animation time, right? So it travels far, but it takes a while to travel there still. So you combine long animation time with low damage, and it basically means Spiral Torpedo has a bit of a DPS opportunity cost whenever you use it. So you really need to ask yourself, like, is it worth using Spiral Torpedo for the movement and or the AP buff? So there are times where the answer is yes, and maybe sometimes where the answer is no, right? If you're at a spot like Ulukita or Deke spots where you're really trying to, make sure you're at the AP cap, it may be the case that you want to use Spiral Torpedo. But again, for spots like, for example, Tongue-Red Ruins, right, you can, instead of baking Spiral Torpedo into the combo, you can bake Spiral Torpedo into your movement. But of course, again, you can always write Spiral Torpedo and then use a spender. So it's very good in that scenario. Just don't think you have to use Spiral Torpedo, you know, at a set point in a specific combo. Be a little bit more deliberate with your Spiral Torpedo usage. Next up is Mass Destruction. So I absolutely love Mass Destruction. I personally think it's one of Awakening Mystic's best movement tools. It's very fast, as you can see, and because it doesn't really travel too far, you can basically think of it as like a pretty precise movement tool. If you just need to make a small adjustment, right? If you're just doing filler damage and then you need to move just a little bit, right? Boom, you're at mobs' backs. Do be careful. It's easy to do the next or the second and maybe third hits of Absolute Mass Destruction. You see, if I hold R and B, that's where you get all 3 hits. You really want to do only the first hit, right? Because we're only using this as repositioning, not damage, right? Not for the accuracy buff with the second hit, just movement. And so a good way you can get used to doing one hit is actually weaving Mass Destruction into the shard generating sequence. So kind of like so. Just right. Try to put in Mass Destruction where you can. Just like that. So you can do that for a little bit, get a good feel for just right tapping Mass Destruction and then doing another skill input. Learn to use Mass Destruction frequently. Obviously, you don't want to just use it willy-nilly. Use it deliberately for quick repositioning. But personally, I think any or all Awakening Mystics should become familiar with using Mass Destruction. Alright, last up is Crouching Wolf Backstep. This one's also pretty useful in that you will use Crouching Wolf a lot for the attack speed already. So oftentimes, right, you are doing filler damage or you're just approaching a pack and generating shards. So there's a good chance that you have to reposition somehow already. So just getting used to using the backstep will do you a lot of good. And so because the Crouching Wolf backstep also doesn't travel very far, if you really need to cover more distance, a lot of times I like to use Mass Destruction with Crouching Wolf backstep. So, you know, I'll do something like this, right? So I'm pretty close to the pack, right? Not too far, like with Flash Step and Spiral Torpedo. And with this, right, I'll be able to, like, instantly, right, start the combo. So you can still see, right, my Rising Dragon, you know, hits all the mobs. So those two together are pretty good. It basically allows you to be more flexible, a little more precise with your movement and repositioning. Just as, like, you know, a final point, I'm not really going to say anything about Silent Step. It's very slow. It has a lot of end lag. Like here you can see. There's no way really to cancel that. So the TLDR is don't use Silent Step unless you just really need the iframe. So that covers movement. Now we just need to put it all together. The concept is fairly simple. Basically, you just want to move whenever you feel that too many mobs are facing you. So just once you're doing some damage, if everyone's facing you, right, you just want to move. And you can use movement at any point. There's not really any bad times. Really, the only bad time truly is right before Wave Orb, where you may need to be careful, right? So like you need to make sure you are using Flash Step or Spiral Torpedo right into Wave Orb. If you try to do Crouching Wolf Backstep or Mass Destruction, you will not get the cancel. So that's pretty much really the only times you need to be a little bit more picky with which movement tool you use. But other than that, it's actually pretty free flow. So right? Just as you're using skills, you can kind of get used to moving. So yeah, in general, a good rule of thumb is, again, to use movement before using a spender. There's not much point using like a movement tool if you're still kind of in filler damage phase, right? Because it could be that by the time you finish filler damage and want to start your burst with spenders, the mobs like face you, and then you won't be doing back attack damage. So really focus on doing movement right before big damage. Just think about it like that, basically. And so yeah, that's pretty much it. Once you practice Awakening Mystic more, you will get a better feel for all of her cooldowns, so kind of what sequences you can put together. Like I said before, Rising Dragon has 8 seconds, Sea Burial has 7 seconds. So given that you start combos with Rising Dragon, you can kind of assume that if Rising Dragon is up, then Sea Burial will be up, right? So those two skills, those two spenders, actually a really good pairing. So you can always like kind of think of a sequence, like you can basically, you know, you can tend to rely on a certain sequence, right? Wave Orb is kind of the only thing that's out of line. So even to this day, a lot of times, you know, I'll just do this combo, Rushing Waters, Earth Splitter, right, Sea Burial, and then maybe I'm like waiting for Wave Orb. Wave Orb is up, I move to mobs' backs, and boom, Wave Orb. So something like that. And outside of that, yeah, it's just more practice, more experience. Awakening Mystic is pretty simple. The kit isn't too hard to understand, so it's really just about making the most of what we have, right? Using damage, using our spender skills at optimal moments, right? And then also like knowing when to use movement and also which movement skill is best for each specific scenario. To end this part of the video, I know a lot of people are going to ask, and so here are some good like cookie cutter copy paste add-ons. But personally, I do recommend that you adjust your add-ons based on your own playstyle. A lot of people's add-ons are constructed with specific combos or skill sequences in mind. So if you basically don't do exactly what they do during your grind, you won't get the most out of your add-ons. So outside of, you know, just making sure that you have like monster AP minus DP, right, attack speed, and then just percent damage modifiers, right, maybe critical hit rates, you can really just decide for yourself what you want to do with add-ons. One quick note though, Tidal Burst is our filler spam skill, and so it's a good skill to have like back and critical hit damage, as well as accuracy, plus accuracy minus evasion add-ons if you do need it for a grind spot, because you'll be spamming Tidal Burst, you will constantly be applying these add-ons. Outside of that, it's pretty flexible, honestly. You can't really go too wrong. But yeah, you can use these add-ons just to start. Well, that's about all I have to say for this video. Honestly, I took a lot longer than expected to patch everything together, but I'm glad that I decided to make this guide. BDO and Awakening Mystic are near and dear to my heart. I truly wish for all of you watching to enjoy playing Mystic someday. As much fun as I've had making this video, I don't plan on making anything like this in the future. I'm getting busier in life, and I'm not even sure how active I'll be the next couple of years. Perhaps that's why I decided to make this video now while I'm still playing. Even though my future in BDO is in question, I hope that I inspire at least one person to pick up Mystic and show the world her potential. For now, I don't have many plans. I have a crypt video recorded during the Termian event, and with my newly acquired editing skills, I could maybe include some commentary and analysis with the grind hour. Beyond that, I'll have to see. Thanks again everyone for watching, and I'll see you later.